In this video, we will talk about foreign key constraints. So I went ahead and created an employee table having an ID, which is an integer, that is the primary key for the table, followed by a full name, that is a varchar. So this table is very basic, just for demonstration purposes. Then I inserted 3 employees into my table, and yes, you can insert them all in one line by just separating the parentheses containing the values with a comma. At the end, I just wrote this command to describe the table to show me that this is the primary key and what's in the table. Now, I want to enforce the fact that a dependent cannot exist without an employee. So I basically want to enforce the fact that dependent is a weak entity. So let me take this code out and let me create a dependent table. So I will start with create table. I will call my table dependent. And what I will have here is I need a dependent ID, which is going to be an integer, and I will set this as the primary key of my table. I will follow this by dependent name, which is a varchar, and I'll just have it to 255. And then I will also need the employee ID, because remember, I need the employee ID to have it as a foreign key for this table. So emp ID, this is an integer. And then finally, let me just have relationship. So what is the relationship of the dependent to the employee? So the relationship is going to be varchar, and it is going to be 220 will do. Okay. Now the last thing I want to do is I want to basically include my constraint. So I will have a comma here, and I will say constraint, and I will give my constraint a name. So the name is going to be dependent to employee foreign key. And this constraint is going to be a foreign key, and I will have to choose the column from this table in which I want to set it as my column key. So the foreign key, so it is going to be emp ID. And now I need to tell my database which column I'm referencing, so which column I'm referring to. So I'll say references, and then which table is that? So I'm referencing employee table, and I'm specifically targeting the ID column. Okay. So if I run this, I just created my foreign key constraint. Okay. So what I can do after this is I will try to add some values in my table. So let me just comment this out to have it in here. So let me try to insert, or let me just refresh it first to make sure that my table is here. So I got my dependent table, and the columns are here, and I can just go and describe it. Describe dependent, and it should show me that I have a foreign key here. Okay. So insert into dependent values excuse me, and the values are going to be an ID followed by a name. So Bob, for example, and this needs to be followed by an employee ID, so 2, for example, and then finally what I'll have is the relationship, which is son. So select star from dependent follows this to show me that I got the data inserted. So I got Bob inserted as the son, and Bob is the son of employee number 2. So what's gonna happen if I try to run something that's, or basically give an employee ID that does not exist in the employee table? So another name here, Jane, for example, and Jane is the wife of employee number 7. Now I got an error here that says, let me just try to expand this, cannot add or update child role. So basically what's saying is, since this does not exist, so a foreign key constraint fails because ID number 7 does not exist in the employee table. And if that ID does not exist in the employee table, then it's going to reject this whole record, because what we did with this constraint here is we basically trying to enforce the fact that a dependent cannot exist in the database unless we have an employee in which this dependent is a dependent of that employee. And now this case says this is the wife of employee number 7, which does not exist in our table. Remember, we had only 1, 2, and 3. So if I go back and make it 1 and try to run this back again, now it's inserted and it's fine. There is no problem with it. And this is how a foreign key is going to allow us to basically enforce some relationships. Now this will work with one-to-one relationships, one-to-many relationships. It is going to work exactly the same.